Do what?
Don't you start.
Start what?
Gosh.
I know what you're doing. You're recording already.
This is the after show.
This is the after
I've been
show.
recording for 15 minutes now.
Oh, man. Here we go.
Only 15
Everything
minutes
else I
left.
have done has been through the guise of ignorance. When I've pretended that you hadn't been listening or hearing,
You're a shithead.
I have been getting
So unprofessional.
everything. I'm lying. I really hadn't. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the after show. And I don't even have to say patreon.com/getontap because you are here. So we're here for the after show for our episode for our well-regulated militia with Brian and Jeremiah. Simon, of course, we're back here. We're going to jump into some questions that people have had from X. We're going to jump into a few other topics. Let the tie down a little bit. Maybe curse a little bit more because you're paying for it and you know what you're getting. One thing I wanted to jump on before we dive back into some of the things we were talking about with the militia here was the rumor from our sponsor that was circulating a little bit earlier. So Rocky Mountain Burger Company is a sponsor of this show. And when I say sponsor,
Loosely termed.
and that being that Brian has set aside, he said $50 a month back in May, I think. Yeah, I'll pay you $50 a month to mention me on every show, whatever, do the sponsorship thing. I have not once reached back. I haven't got paid $1 of that because whatever password or whatever didn't work and I didn't bother to check back in. And a couple of the reasons for that is one, Brian opened up the early Inn and the Burger Company many a times for us. One being the big, huge Spike event for Spike Cohen, which if you haven't come down to that was a big event where everybody showed up, played some music, listened.
Huge event.
Yeah, it was a good time. And for a Tuesday night during graduation season and sports ending season and during hay season, we had a pretty good turnout for a Tuesday night, and it's led to quite a few more. So Brian, huge sponsor of the show, also lets us use his bell room for some of our podcasts, which I hadn't talked about this on the regular show, but we're in, I'm back and forth right now with Sean Greer. He's the manager for Crawford and Power. We're huge Crawford and Power fans, so we're trying to get them back on the
Local
show.
acts.
They just got
Love
done.
'em.
They just got done opening for Travis Tritt at the Salem Civic Center,
Again.
which is massive. Yes, massive. So we're working in conjunction with them. We're working in conjunction with Tyler over at 5 Points Music Sanctuary to get a couple of big shows coming up here in the future with Colby Helms, perhaps Larry Keel. That's all in the down low, but we're working this kind of stuff in, and you know. Brian, he hooks us up. He's going to be hooking us up here in the future. And this
He supported us throughout,
yes.
regardless of any financial whatever.
Yes. And
He's
so
been there for us.
The rumor was that has been started was that Twin Creeks Distillery, which is a local joint right across the street, Chris Prilliman, who is somebody I'm trying to get on the show here in the very near future as well. Bootlegger goes way back. My stepdad's got a good relationship with him. I'm excited to get him on the show. Apparently somebody had made some complaint about something that they had done during the 150th festival, I think. Something to do with whatever the case may be, an ABC agent was involved. And there are rumors around town that Brian was the one who called in this complaint on them for some kind of jealous reasons. And we'll talk about this on the next show as well. But for one, Brian isn't a snitch. Brian is not somebody who is from here. So when he come into this town, he has a very good understanding of how things operate around here, and he has assimilated very well. He offers a great product. He's done a ton for this town, and for whoever started this rumor, and I'm thinking it was probably started somewhere within the confines of our wonderful town council, or somebody involved in that neck of the woods.
Well, our sources do pretty much.
Yes, we have sources on the town council that will remain unnamed that have allowed us this privilege of knowing this kind of information. That look, Brian is a good dude. And Brian is smart, and he's a businessman, and he knows good and damn well if you rat out somebody across the street from you that is a local moonshiner, your business is going to be ruining this town. So it makes no sense whatsoever for him. So he's actually reached out to him. If you actually go to the profile, if you go to their post on his page, the Twin Creeks Distillery came out and said, we know Brian has not started this rumor. They have acknowledged it. They said that Brian and the Rocky Mountain Burger Company donated money to the Twin Creeks Distillery when they had their fire. He buys products for them. So this is all a bunch of horse shit. This is town local government meddling bullshit nonsense. And we know, we know for you all who are listening, we know, and we haven't forgot about it, and we're not going to forget about it. And all we're doing right now is finding a way to prepare our assault on you when we bring this back to light, because this nonsense will not stand. I'm sick and tired of government and town council members and bureaucrats,
Chinese
and all these
whispers,
nonsense assholes coming out here and spreading these rumors because they've got a beef with the town. And I have played nice with this town. Like, that's one thing people don't understand. Like, I'm not a Steve Angle fan, and I'm not a Holland Purdue fan. I'm a Rocky Mount fan, and I will sit here and criticize both administrations till I'm blue in the face. Now, a big reason why I haven't as much for this new administration is because I understand that they are operating with the confines. Look, the last one was here for 16 years. We had a good idea of what the hell he did, and it wasn't very good. I'm related to him, and I'll sit here and tell you it wasn't good. I don't go to family reunions anymore. The new guy, Holland, I appreciate him coming on the show. I like what he's doing for the town. The 150th was great.
Superb event.
Phenomenal event. I like that he's trying to incorporate some of the culture, but somewhere in the midst of our town or our council or somewhere are starting these rumors, and I don't appreciate it, and it needs to be addressed, and we're going to address it here in the very near future. So, if you're one of these people that are continuing to operate under this assumption that you can say or do whatever you want to and there'll be no repercussions, we haven't forgotten. We have eased away from the town and county matters because we've got a lot of national, regional matters, but make no mistake about it. The war room is still very active.
Yep.
The war room, and I'm not going to tolerate this bullshit much longer. I'm not. If you're going to make up rumors and you're going to make up lies and you're going to create fake profiles on Facebook to stir up drama and stir up problems, we've got you in our sights. You are not smarter than us. I can tell you that.
We know who you are
now. I can tell you you're not
we
smarter
know
than
who
us.
you are. So moving along.
I want to move
swiftly.
along that and get back into our guests. I'm sorry that took so long. I'm irritated as I'll get out. We'll get right back into our guests. I want to jump right back into some of the stuff. Real quick, what is something that we can share with our subscribers that we might have not talked about in the real show that might have been important that y'all forgot about before we get to our Twitter questions? Something we might have skipped by, even if it's coming from our British spy over here.
Oh dear. So that automatically makes me first. Yeah, I'm a little bit perturbed about the BLM narrative that you know that we receive. It's a little bit contrived. It's from a playbook. And to disassociate yourself from the BLM national narrative is very disingenuous. So we've got, the BLM swinging around talking about, and this is the national narrative, particularly Chicago, supporting Hamas and all the atrocities that have gone henceforth.
I like how he says Hamas.
Well, I could have been quite vulgar about that. But then how does the regional BLM narrative relate to the national BLM narrative?
Well, this is a relevant question because, Brian and Darnell, and this is the context we have to go off of, is they have brought up the militia both times in our shows, like specifically went out of their way to bring up the militia. And I'm sure you boys have listened to that show as well, so you know exactly the questions they were asking. And
I'll be a pig about it. I'm really pissed off that you can try and stride the fence, and disassociate yourself from that narrative. I'm quite frankly appalled by that.
To be fair, and to be fair though, everything that happened was after our show. So we don't know. I haven't listened to any of their recent shows. That's on me. I haven't listened to any of the recent, so I don't know how they have responded to that. And hopefully we get them back on the show. We can ask them how they respond to it. But based off of their
based on their disassociation with the national narrative,
from our previous shows,
from the regional narrative, I still have an enormous issue with that. And to say disingenuous, that's being extremely conservative.
Well, hopefully we'll get a chance to hear from them on a specific level, because at the end of the day, I personally don't really give a rat's ass what Chicago says. I don't care what New York says. I don't care what LA says.
Yeah, but that's their national narrative.
But when you, like I said, I've said this before, you don't see Hindus walking around here with swastikas. And most people don't know this, but the swastika was a Hindu thing long before Hitler ever compromised it. And why do they not walk around? Because Hitler ruined it. So what I suggest is, look, BLM has ruined it for your terminology at this point in time. I'm not saying you have to change your goals. I'm not asking to change your mindset. Well, maybe your mindset a little bit, because that's political speaking, and we'll talk about that later. But at least change your vessel and get it away from BLM, because whether you would like it or not, or you can scream to your high in the heavens that we're not part of national, but that's not what the rest of the people are seeing. That's not what the rest of the people see. BLM such and such agreeing with the Palestinians and the terrorism. You see BLM such and such agree. So at the end of the day, if we're really concerned with our communities and the perception and really trying to move forward, then we need to ditch whatever. And that goes for us as well. If it comes to it.
Disassociate with yourself.
Keep the same message, just form a new name. Form a new damn name. That's it.
If you've got to swing around and say Black Lives Matter, which I absolutely agree with, yes, they do. So do White Lives Matter. So do whatever. All lives matter.
No, they don't.
So, well,
no, they don't. Rapists' lives, child pornographers' lives, they don't matter.
I get that.
But I understand your sentiment.
But their narrative in supporting and being BLM activists, when the national, when that national support says we are supporting Hamas throughout this absolute atrocity, if you can't distance yourself from that, I've got a problem with it. And if you don't publicly distance yourself from the national narrative, you've made yourself part of the problem, and I will never support that.
I don't support any side of it. But for you gentlemen who are coming from a more professional standpoint, what did perhaps we miss out on in the show that you think was of utmost importance?
So actually, the topic you were just discussing has some relevance to the militia. If we look at the history, and we touched a little bit on this part of the history of the militia, through the colonial period, the monarchy imposed despotism and tyranny on the colonies. They passed the Quartering Act, the Stamp Act. They had all kinds of taxes put on their.
It was tyranny.
It was tyranny. The people weren't safe in their papers or their possessions. Their houses could be. They were ordered to open up their houses to seizures and inspections.
Practically exactly where we find ourselves right now.
That's exactly where I was going with this. And so all throughout that, the response of the founders and of the citizens was to, as Jeremiah said, to keep petitioning for redress of those grievances. They did not want to go to war, and they held the moral high ground because they didn't pull the trigger first. They didn't go and say, well, we've been oppressed. You've taken our property. You've stolen our farms and our goods and services, and you've killed our personnel, our people.
Taxation without representation.
I'm actually drawing an analogy to something else.
Ooh.
I'm making a comparison to Palestine. So in the case of the Palestinians, they have all these grievances. I'm not going to say that they are completely without having been.
They're not without merit.
Well, their arguments have merit. They have been treated poorly. They have been systemically abused under the situation, especially in Gaza. And I'm not saying that the Israelis don't have a right to secure the sovereignty of their nation. I'm simply pointing out that all of these things existed, these problems exist in Gaza, and many of them need to be redressed. With that being said, that does not justify an armed assault that results in the deaths of hundreds of civilians, the capture of hostages,
kidnapping,
thousands of injuries, the destruction of property. They were the military aggressors, and as such, their actions are not defensible. What is the difference between that situation and the situations where the militia on Lexington Green on the morning of April 19, 1775, on all of the opportunities to take the fight to the crown, the colonists did not. They wanted to avoid conflict as much as possible. They wanted to use the mechanisms of governance to settle their disputes and to redress their grievances. Only when the tyranny came to their doorstep, only when the column of British regulars, redcoats, marched down the road on the way to Lexington, did those men of Lexington stand on that town green, and they said, this far and no farther. And so they maintained the moral high ground because they didn't start the fight. They're not the ones who were the aggressors. And so for anybody to defend the actions of Hamas and what they did militarily, the assault on Israeli civilians and Israeli infrastructure, is not defensible, in my opinion. I'm just using the opportunity to draw an example, a comparison of how, on one side, people maintain the just and moral high ground in the case of the Founding Fathers, and on the other side, Hamas did not. And folks who support that are not either.
Well, now we're delving into the issue of proxy wars.
Well, before you even get to the proxy war thing, which, I mean, that's America's bread and butter right there. I mean, to play devil's advocate here, though, there are a lot of people on the other side of the aisle that will say that the Israeli government has done everything to the Palestinian people that the Palestinian military through Hamas returned the favor doing to Israeli civilians and citizens. And I just caution everybody just to not get yourself so intertwined in this that it drives you crazy, because at the end of the day, I really don't know the truth, and I'm sure it lies somewhere in the middle, but I don't trust the Israeli government any more than I trust our own government, and I don't trust the Hamas government any more than I trust our own government. I think there are a handful of rich elites, no matter how you slice it, from all sides of the aisle, that are sending tons and tons of innocent people to their death, whatever way you want to slice it. So I think there's a lot of fault from both sides. I really do. I can understand how some people will look, but at the same time, you know, like let's say the music festival that was attacked, you know, propaganda and AI and crisis actors and deception is so prevalent in today's world that you really don't know what to expect anymore. And I don't know how much of this stuff is true, and I don't know how much of it is legitimate or relevant, but I do find myself asking questions like, how is it that the United States is on the brink of World War III over something that started over a massacre at a music festival? We had a massacre at a music festival in Las Vegas 6 years ago that we don't even have a freaking motive for. So we're going to World War III. We're on the brink of World War III for other countries right now over something that happened that kicked it off, where we had the same thing happen here 6 years ago. We don't even have answers for. We don't have a motive for. And by the way, none of that makes sense anyway. None of the narrative of that whole event in Vegas makes sense, because of somebody who's military trained and somebody understands how defense works and somebody with common sense. You're going to tell me that in the most heavily secured and camera-focused city in the United States of America somehow managed to miss a guy who moved a ton of weapons up to his balcony? And oh, by the way, and I can tell you right now, I don't know who the security for these casinos are, but I can tell you right now, I will bet my left nut that whoever runs the security for these big casinos is somebody that has a ton of experience and law enforcement and military and counterterrorism, whatever the case may be, because you are dealing with millions and millions. They're not hiring some Joe Blow schmo security guard to run these. So how it took 10 minutes for security to get up to that floor. I mean, these are all for another show, but my main point is, why are we focused so much on something that's happened on the other side of the world? We've got our own questions here in this country. So I'm just urging people, my point through all this is to not immerse yourself in all this information and take it and run with it the second it comes in, because most likely in 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, it's all going to come out that it was bullshit.
Well, one thing you also got to remember too, I hate this excuse all the time, but it is a distraction, right? Distraction, right? But at the same time, if you realize that through creating conflict, that I don't want to get into this too deep, but basically Muslims and Marxists believe that through conflict, they are bringing about the utopia and the end of the world. And so when you realize that their belief fundamentally is that they are ushering in utopia, it understands the chaos that you're seeing today, and not to also feed into that chaos by creating your own.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. We absolutely, and your advice is spot on, that we should really not participate in this narrative. People coming out and outright endorsing this or that and getting us involved so heavily as we are is really a mistake. I think it's a mistake.
You're creating a false dichotomy between two bad choices.
Right. That's precisely correct.
And there's a third choice. Don't be involved.
Right.
There you go.
And also too, what's also disturbing is, you see people on the right counseling people for, supporting Hamas or not. At the end of the day, it is free speech.
That's correct.
Because, okay, so what? Free speech does not affect another person's individual right. So therefore, you do have a right to say what it is. You do have a right to say whom you support.
But the irony there is, doesn't it seem to come from a lot of the learning institutions?
Well, this is what I have an issue with. Like, I follow Jack Posobiec all the time. I like him. He's a good guy, right? But then again, he's out there like saying, hey, saying that the guys at Harvard should be fired because they're saying they're free speech. No. You would cry foul if they were right-wing people saying the same thing and getting canceled.
Well, that's the problem, is the left operates by different rules than the standard right.
Yeah, but
does.
We're falling into the same rules.
Right.
And what we're caught up in this point in time is they are reactionary. They are saying, oh, well, if you were believing in this 5 months ago, you'd have been canceled. So because you believe in this now, you should be canceled. I'm with you. And I think free speech is absolute. And And the reason I say this is because if you're a Hamas supporter and you're walking down the street and you're saying, okay, I agree with what they did. I agree with them parachuting in on gliders and making their point be known. Well, it's the same thing, and it's the same argument that I make with Brian and Darnell about the Klans members. If you want to open up a bakery as a Klans member, I encourage you to do that. Why? Well, because now I know who you are and what you represent, and I know I don't want to spend business with you. The only thing that censorship does is it pushes bad people underground, and it creates a world where you don't really understand what the truth is because everything else has become so convoluted. Let people be who they are. Let people discriminate. Let people say their piece, because that way we can all understand who they are and understand not to do business with them.
Well,
but we don't have the right to go and take other people's lives.
You can't
and
take
that was the
no,
point.
not that. No, not that. I understand that much.
But here comes the issue, and I've been there. I've been on the ground, in that Gaza Israel conflict 11 years ago, 12 years ago. I was rocket attacks. I saw the Iron Dome at work. I had to go from Egypt, one side of Egypt, Cairo, where they were killing Christians, killing Christians on that road to Alexandria, where we had to take a helicopter from Cairo to Alexandria because the road wasn't safe, because they were killing Christians. I mean, I don't know what's going on in that neck of the woods, and then to be offshore in Israel, and we're setting up their energy infrastructure, and they're throwing rockets at us.
See, this is one thing people don't understand about the Middle East, because everyone has such a narrow view of history. So everyone gripes that the British divided up the Middle East. And like in Iraq, for example, you have the Shia, the Sunni, and the Kurds. So that was done intentionally, because you have to remember, after World War I, the Ottoman Empire had just fell, and Britain took over majority of the territory that was the Ottoman Empire.
But Lawrence of Arabia also gave the Arab nations.
Well,
anyway.
but the Ottoman Empire stood as the threat to the West for centuries, 500, 600, 700 years. And so the Ottoman Empire had just been defeated. So what better way to prevent them from fighting back against the West is to is to encourage divisions, and so they cause fighting against themselves and cannot unite against the West.
Fomenting infighting. Yeah. And they did it by separating Levant. That's what they did.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's that is empire building. Yeah. I mean, that's how it works.
You're weakening your enemies. And
absolutely.
So, therefore, by creating divides and subgroups and drawing on moral distinctions, you are weakening your opponent.
Sound familiar?
It's very much so.
Currently being employed right here in this country.
Yeah.
Because we are no longer Americans. We are no longer holding to individual rights. We have been, split into different
but
groups.
what we've got at risk now, throughout all of this, is the petrodollar.
Well, and the empire has fell. I mean, that's just, we just need to come to the conclusion that
right. But the petrodollar now is in an evolution of decline.
Wow, this is a heavy topic.
Yes, it is.
Oh, great! There you go. Right. Actually, I kind of want to address some of the X questions.
Yeah,
I think that's a good idea.
Let's get to those right now, real quick. We've talked on for a second, and we're gonna get these guys on again, both of y'all. I promise.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because this has been super informative, and I think the rest of the world needs, and hopefully we can get you guys on Twitter Spaces X at some point in time. And if we can't get you all here in front of some of the people we know around the country, because I think there's a lot of people out there who need to be informed about this kind of stuff. But I want to get, and here's some of them. Let's see. I'm going to go through here on some of the X. Some great comments. Our buddy Brandon from the state of Appalachia had a good question, and I know you all kind of touched on this, and I don't want to go into his question now I'm going to read it, but I want to go into it because I want Brandon back on here. I'd love to get him back on with you guys to be able to ask some questions as well, because he's doing a wonderful thing. If you haven't listened to any of those shows, go back and listen to anything to the State of Appalachia with Brandon. He's got his homestead going on there. But, you know, he was just asking how do groups plan to avoid falling into the routine that all groups do. An example is how not to end up like the Appalachian Ranger Association that I wrote about. And go check out his Substack. Do you know who the Appalachian Ranger is? Is this a question that you understand?
I'm not familiar with the Appalachian Ranger, but I understand the nature of the question. Essentially, he's asking, as we develop, how do we not fall into the trap of just stagnation and eventually having folks just stop participating? And the answer to that is simple. Up until now, the only option for the seizure of arms that are constitutionally guaranteed has been picking up those arms, putting on your kit, and walking out your front door and doing something that is unlawful. That's the last option that's been left to people. And let's be clear, there are a lot of people right now who are accelerationists, who believe that the republic has already failed. There are folks out there who are saying, what more can we do? Voting has failed. And the answer to all those questions is we need to revitalize the militias of the several states. We need to get people actively engaged in exercising the entirety of the Second Amendment. We need to get them well regulated. And in doing so, that acts as a check against the tyranny of a centralized federal government that is seeking to expand its powers beyond those which have been enumerated to it by the founding fathers. And so how do we avoid falling into that trap of doing nothing? Because we're doing something. We're actively involved in exercising our Second Amendment rights. And in doing so, it's providing evidence so that we may have standing, so that when, not if, a state legislature or the federal government passes a ban on an entire category of firearms, we then have standing to take this through the judicial process. Without being well regulated, without having that evidence that we're well regulated, we won't have standing. And that leaves us with no other option except going out the front door with your kid on. And that's what we're trying to avoid. That right is guaranteed to us. The founders talked about it in the Declaration of Independence. But that is the absolute last possible worst case scenario, last right that we should employ. We should exhaust every other means available to us. And until now, this argument has not been employed, this argument of a collective right of militia service, which should guarantee us to be able to keep and bear arms suitable for military service.
You know, kind of extending off of this, I know Simon and I went out and hung out with a bunch of these people back over Labor Day weekend, and a phenomenal crowd showed up. And you want to talk about, how invested people are in what you all are doing, how invested people are into the movement that we're trying to portray here at the podcast about homestead and sustainability, protecting yourselves, all those kind of things. What a crowd that showed up there to Clayton Lake that weekend, and from different backgrounds, from different localities. Hopefully here in the near future, maybe we can coordinate something that he's doing, setting up with those guys to set up and meet with you all and be able to educate them to take back to their communities, because this is a phenomenal opportunity. And I would love sometime in the near future to sit Brandon down and have a conversation with you all, because we've talked about the state of Appalachia and peaceful divorces and all that kind of stuff. And he's incredibly smart on the topics. I would love to sit y'all down with him at some point in time.
That would be great. I'd love to do that. This will only work if the people pick up this long abandoned right. It's the only way this is going to work.
Yep.
It takes everybody being actively involved to reassert their long forgotten, long abandoned right of voluntary militia service.
Apathy is not going to count.
So Alexander, I don't know if I said this earlier in the main show, but Alexander Hamilton actually talked about he said to the other Federalist supporters, he said, don't worry about this right to keep and bear arms. Don't worry about the militias of the several states. The citizens will grow fat and tired and apathetic, and they'll lose interest in exercising these rights, and will be able to assert a select militia. We will be able to then have all of the powers of the military under the control of the central authority of the federal government.
1903 Dick Acts.
It took until then for it to happen, but it was a gradual process.
Yeah.
And it was noticeable already by the 1830s.
I got a story about that sometime.
Share it.
Oh gosh.
Come on.
So you mentioned the 1830s, which is very applicable. So I attended the Virginia Military Institute back in 2010, and I eventually became a tour guide and became well versed in the history of the Institute. And so VMI originally was the militia arsenal in Lexington, Virginia. It was manned by members of the Virginia militia. And the reason a VMI was founded was that the militiamen were known to be vulgar and also causing disturbances in the peaceful Presbyterian town. Washington College at the time was right next door, and the militiamen would cause havoc in the town. And so several of the leaders in the community, John Preston and several others, decided that they would form an institute to create cadets that would go on and be the military leaders in the community. And so what they did is that they formed a 3-year college, with the 4th year being completed at Washington College. And on November 11th, 1839, the cadets at VMI took over the guard of the arsenal. And actually, to this day, while school has been in session, they still man, quote unquote, the institute. And so, one thing that was not mentioned too is that VMI is actually in the Virginia Organized Militia.
Yes, it is.
The teachers hold rank in the Virginia Militia, and the cadets are in the Virginia Militia. One thing that would happen if the governor would ever muster the militia is that the professors at the institute would hold rank at the rank of colonel, and also the cadets would be the officers to form the companies and the battalions of the Virginia Militia. And also the Virginia Polytechnical Institute Corps of Cadets as well would fall into that rank structure.
I don't think many people understand that, but aside from traditional military colleges like VMI, Citadel, even West Point to some degree, Navy, all this kind of stuff, that Virginia Tech with VPI, their Corps Cadets, and Texas A&M are the only 2 major universities in the country that still have a Corps Cadets that's not a military institution.
And I do want to say that VPI was founded by a VMI graduate. Just want to say that.
There we go.
We all have our start.
Get that shot in.
Yeah, good on you.
So everything that Jeremiah just talked about is statutorily defined. It's in the state statutes of Virginia. There are numerous state statutes that are directly applicable to the unorganized militia. So none of these things that we're talking about is pulled out of the ether or the atmosphere. This is all codified. And one of the reasons that the citizens are hesitant to engage in participating in activities like what we're describing is because they're unaware that these codes exist, and they're unaware of their rights. And that's partially a product of them not being taught. And I believe that's not been by accident. I believe that people are intentionally not informed of all of the rights that they have. And that's part of the overall strategy to centralize authority and centralize power. And the founders gave us the remedy for that. We simply need to exercise the rights that the Creator gave us and the founders affirmed in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We need to stop being lazy and get up and participate.
Yeah. Well, Brandon, I hope that answers your
no-brainer.
question.
I mean-
Like I said, I'm hoping at some point in time, because y'all have draped your beautiful flag right here, right over top of my state of Appalachia flag here, which I will allow on these premises for the sole purpose of, of
supporting the
goodwill.
cause, brother.
Yes, support the cause. But so I would love to get him on the show. I want to jump on to the next one real quick, because we got a handful of questions here that I'd like to get to, because I want these people to tune back in the next go round, because I want to do this again. I want to get more thorough, and I want them to have more questions. But this was a fairly simple one. It could be, I would assume, but this is from G. Good Lord, G. Willikers. I think of a constitutional militia as an extended neighborhood watch program. If we're allowed to patrol a neighborhood, then we sure as shit should be allowed to patrol the town or county. How far do the boundaries of our homes extend, if not all the way to the U.S. border?
Okay, so we have to obey state statute and federal statute. The militia has no power of policing, no authority of arrest, no powers of military, unless and until the governor musters the militia for action, or the sheriff, using the powers of posse comitatus, or the state statute that has been given to him, asks for assistance from the citizenry. I referred to those earlier in the podcast. But as far as your own property, as individuals, you have the right to defend your life, the lives of your families. And where it gets kind of sketchy is property. And by sketchy, I mean this. You cannot use lethal force in the defense of property. Those are statutes and laws that have been created that we're all obligated to abide by. But that does not mean that you simply walk away from your own property. If you have a well-regulated militia, if you have an organization in your community that sets up a mutual assistance group within your community, and there's some kind of rioting or some kind of incident that's going on, you can work to coordinate your defense of your homestead, of your property, with your mutual assistance group, with the other participants. And if you're standing there, the people who are coming forward towards your property will have a choice. They can attack you to get to your property, or leave. And if they attack you, you have the right to defend yourself.
And those are our God-given rights.
That's correct. That's a right given to us by the Creator that the founders merely recognized and affirmed in our Constitution.
That's very important.
Preach it, Simon.
It pre-exists the Constitution.
Absolutely,
And that's
it
something
does.
that the left does not accept.
And there's the problem.
Well, our next question comes from Crusader Prince, who says, well, I'm British, and I didn't even know what a constitutional militia was. I do now. MAGA and the West will follow. That's not even a question, but I just
Bit
want
of a statement.
to bring that up for Simon.
Oh, God bless him.
Do you think he eats fish and chips or beanie weenies and bread or whatever
Fish
the
and
hell
chips.
it is?
Or,
He's a-
excuse me,
he's
Whatever the hell
he's-
it is,
he's gonna be
whatever
a
the
fish and
hell that
chips guy.
dish was that I shared the other day on
Chips.
Twitter, it looked like buttered bread, not even toast, buttered bread, beans with weenies in them.
Oh, no, I saw it.
Yeah,
I
and
kept commenting on it. I don't think Simon realized I was me commenting on it.
What, beans on toast, mate?
It wasn't even on toast.
Chips are Belgium.
They look like the most bland potatoes cut without any kind of seasoning or salt, mixed in
Savages.
with chili beans and beanie weenies.
I saw a thing about, you're talking about, was you fighting a war for spices? Or it wasn't spices. Spices is a synonym for drugs. So when you realize that they're talking about opium and
There we go.
not flavor.
Well, I just had to get the British question out here because we got a few of them. I mean, some of these comments are pretty funny. The Appalachian astronaut says, if you guys figure out why gun prices never came back down to reality post Sandy Hook, let me know. I'm sure that's not a question suited for this one, but let's see. Good one, Kathleen. Are well-regulated militias exempt from laws that ban arms? I know we talked about this in the show, though, and this is why we're setting this kind of thing up.
Right. That's exactly correct. So that's a great question to ask. And that's really the purpose and intent for our organization, is to exercise our Second Amendment right to volunteer and be well-regulated, serve in a volunteer capacity in well-regulated militia. And in doing so, we provide evidence that we are exercising that right, and that allows us to have standing as a legal argument when a state or if the federal legislature comes along and says, you know what, this category arms is unlawful and you're no longer going to be allowed to keep it. We get to make the argument, yes, we do, because it is necessary for us for service in the militia. So it's a separate argument from the individual rights argument. Now, there have been some developments in the Supreme Court recently, and there's a lot of discussion and speculation that because of the text history and traditions arguments that are now being applied to the decision-making process by the Supreme Court, that a lot of these gun bans and magazine bans that have been instituted by some states like California, New York, Maryland, may be overturned. And it would be overturned on the basis of individual rights. That may happen. I hope it does. But if it doesn't, what we're doing offers another avenue of argument that can be made that has not yet been attempted.
And that's actually a very key argument. I hate to go down the road of legalese and how we support our uninfringed rights to bear arms.
Well, the rights have been infringed.
Well, they've already been infringed.
And just screaming "shall not infringe" doesn't do anything.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, no, it doesn't. So if this works, and I see that it does, absolutely, we need to support it because there is no other recourse.
So let's say people are let's be pessimistic. We go through all this. We do everything we're doing. Virginia legislature flips blue and they pass a ban.
We know that's coming, right?
Well, I think it's an inevitability right at this point. So then what do? Well, we wait until we have an aggrieved party, someone who's been prosecuted under this new law, and then we file suit, and we claim that we have standing under this argument, and we go up through the system. Now, let's say this whole process, as we know, to go all the way to Supreme Court, it takes years. Let's say at the end of the process, it's unsuccessful. Well, then what have we done? What good has all this?
We've delayed the inevitable.
We've organized.
We've organized.
Yeah.
Educated.
And we've trained.
Yes.
And we've prepared ourselves for that last right that the founders wrote about first in the Declaration of Independence.
And that would be a tragedy.
Well, at the end of the day, worst case scenario, you're still better off than how you started.
Right.
You're still better off than how you started.
You got to do something.
Yeah, you have to. I think at this point in time, we have a responsibility to do something. That's why I do this show, for something.
Yeah, but playing that legalese argument at the end of the day really just pisses me clean off because it's some smart mouth attorney who has, managed to manipulate the situation, whereupon our individual rights. It just does my nut in that we've got to this.
But some smart mouth attorneys won the argument in Heller, and they won the argument in McDonnell. And because of that, the individual right to keep and bear certain arms has been enshrined. It's been guaranteed now. And that's better than having to pick up arms and fight for those rights. That's my argument.
You're still petitioning.
Right.
That's the issue. A smart mouth attorney has really led us. Smart mouth attorneys have led us to the position we are now.
Okay,
in.
think about this, right? During the progressive era, a lot of people sat on their hands and
That's
didn't
it.
do
That's
anything.
it. That's the problem. So we got here today because
Through
of 100
apathy.
years of complacence.
Yeah.
If in 1903, if the people had stood up against the Dick Act, in 1916, if the people had stood up when the Congress said, "Oh, state militias no longer have the right to keep and bear arms," if people had stood up at that time and made
But
the argument at
they
that time,
didn't have the ability.
They
didn't have
probably
the
know,
ability.
You know what I mean? Because local papers, big papers, only got so much.
Because that is also an advantage of today, but it's also a threat to those who are
absolutely.
pushing the argument.
But now we're pushing back against precedent, which to me is it's always going to be a hard push, right?
of course.
And that precedent doesn't make the job any easier.
Nothing good is easy.
No.
And I'm going to say this, Simon. How many generations of Americans have fought and died, have bled, have given up their youth, have sacrificed their health, have sacrificed their futures,
Everything.
their families for the preservation of this republic and the liberties that we all enjoy.
And look where we are now.
And all we're talking about is showing up and doing a little bit of training so that we have standing so we can take a case and argue it in the Supreme Court. That's what we're arguing.
That's where I'm at.
That's the least that we can do.
I mean, everyone says, "I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time."
That's exactly what I just said.
My family came to Virginia in 1610. I mean, you know, a lot of us have been here for a long time, and a lot of our families, you know, have sacrificed a lot, you know. So we can sacrifice our little comforts
They
and not watch
sacrificed
TV.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Absolutely.
Because it really irks me when people say, "Oh, I don't want to give up my job." I'm gonna get all right. This is my. I almost lost my job during the stupid vaccine mandates, and a lot of people almost lost their job during the vaccine mandates. Get it through your head. They're coming for you because you're not complying.
Yeah. Oh, we about lost it ourselves.
So, because really, at the end of the day, I just want to be left alone. I want to farm, and I want to raise my family how the best my conscience dictates.
With no other person telling you how you should do it.
Yes, because guess what? I do not bow to the expert. I bow to my own conscience and the Word of God.
Well, if the expert was Fauci,
dude, that's a whole nother conversation
we'd be
that I really started
we'd
delving
be in a
into.
bad place right now.
Isn't it interesting, though, that most of the folks who are looking to revitalize this long-forgotten right, this abandoned right, they're also the same folks who just want to be left alone. They're not looking to take anything from anybody, but those that stand in opposition to us exercising our individual liberties, they want to take things from us. In fact, they ask absurd questions like, well, you're going to have to figure out which of these things that you're going to give up. You're going to have to figure out which one of these rights that you're willing to sacrifice. You're going to be the ones that have to figure out which laws need to be created to further restrict your ability to exercise your rights. Because if you don't, we're going to do it.
I got news for them. They're God-given rights. You cannot take them away. And good luck if you try.
Because this is a principle that a lot of people are missing, is that if we adhere to absolute truth that is evident in nature, it is not relative to the expert. It does not matter what the expert deems as truth. We hold to what is absolute.
The expert is, in fact, the horse's ass.
I got a whole other talk and stuff I really want to go into about this expert class. And there was another one like I came across the other day. I don't remember what it was, but, you know, Justice Jackson was saying, you know, ask if she could define a woman. And, you know, she responded, "I'm not an expert, ask a biologist." And there was another one I came across the other day, and they were, you know, relaying to the expert. And if you really start to notice this whole expert thing is they are giving truth over to relative truth to people who are the experts. I am the science.
And we've seen how the science works over the last 3 years.
The
right?
science cannot be questioned.
The science.
All right. let's go into another question real quick because, oh my God, every time we have a question, there is another rabbit hole episode I think we could go down and talk. It really is. So thank everybody for this. This will be a quick and real quick. Jeff House, because I think this one you've touched on already, but so sometimes the 2A must be backed up with the 1A. What role do militias have in defending our Jewish friends when the government won't? But I think that's a question you stated earlier.
That's a loaded question already.
It is a very loaded question. I think you said we're focused on here locally. Yep. And when it comes to the big situations like that, I think that's out of y'all's purview.
So everybody has the God-given right, the First Amendment rights, the freedom of speech, and without the militias of the several states, those freedoms are no longer guaranteed. And so if we don't step up and exercise the Second Amendment fully, all of the other amendments suddenly become susceptible to encroachment and tyranny. We're no longer secure in our possessions, in our papers, in our homes, warrantless searches and seizures, red flag laws, where one person simply has to say, I was intimidated, or I was threatened, or I feel unsafe. And that sets in motion a series of events where someone is presumed guilty and must prove themselves to be innocent. That is not the system the founders gave us. And so
it's corruption.
It is a corruption of that system. And so what can the militias do? Well, that's also part of our organizing principles, our articles of incorporation. We help educate people. We start spreading the word and informing people, hey, these are all of our rights, all of us collectively, and they only exist if we stand up and use them. And so that's a part of what we can do. As far as specifically endorsing the protection for a certain country, another country, that's not the purview of a county constitutional militia. But that is certainly the right of an individual to stand up and voice that opinion.
I think that covers that
absolutely,
question.
Absolutely. All right. Lonus. Now, Lonus. Now, of course, that last question was by Jeff House. Jeff is a big supporter, comments quite frequently. Lonus, I don't know you very well, and your profile kind of comes off as one of a Fed, but I'll go ahead and ask the question anyway.
Really?
I'm just kidding.
Wow. How did you conclude that?
It's not always the case, but been around since 2017, only has 21 followers. A lot of times that's either bots or feds or something of that nature. But a lot of times it's also people who just don't care enough about Twitter like I do, used to where they just, so I'm giving you hell. I think it's a decent enough question though. So whether it is or not, he says, when an authority organization like the Alphabet Boys, FBI, ATF, state police, are given an order by political executives that violates the constitutional rights of a group or militia, what plans do you all have in place for recourse for being wronged? I would hope a legal network, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely the first course of action, is to utilize the mechanisms of governance that have been given to us by the founders, to utilize the system, to redress our grievances using the system that we have. It's what the left does. It's how they've progressively eroded away our individual liberties, and it's about time that we start using those same mechanisms to take them back. At the end of the day, what is the ultimate plan? The ultimate plan is if we can get every county in the Commonwealth of Virginia to stand up a constitutional militia, think about what that would do to the opinions of legislators when they go ahead and contemplate, hey, I'm about to sign a bill that's going to take away somebody's right. What will be the reaction of people if I do that? And right now, there's nothing in place to act as a check against the recklessness of an uncontrolled legislature that is power mad and seeking to take away our individual rights and liberties. There's nothing in place right now. But if people exercise the Second Amendment fully and volunteer for militia service and provide evidence that they're well regulated, suddenly they're creating an entire block of people that are standing up for their rights and saying, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And that's really the first step in what needs to happen.
Let's talk about that for one minuscule moment. We had that opportunity with the Board of Supervisors, and a certain entity came up with a counter narrative that the Board of Supervisors took on board as being, this is the legal standpoint. We know who they are.
So
it was who was this?
Well, let's be clear about for the situation of the Board of Supervisors. We approached the Board of Supervisors to pass a resolution which we were asking the supervisors to recognize our inalienable right to volunteer for service in the unorganized militia. We were simply asking them to offer an opinion that had no force of law, which was the equivalent of the
2A.
The 2A sanctuary resolution. Thank you. And there were certain individuals on the Board of Supervisors who were completely unwilling to even have that be put on the agenda for public discussion.
They were also influenced by a third party.
Right. So there's something called the Institute for Constitutional Preservation or Protection. It's sad that Georgetown University has lent its credibility to such an organization. What the organization does is it basically lies to citizens, and it tells them that there is no such thing as the unorganized militia, that the citizens do not have a right to volunteer service. And what they do is they select portions of statutes and they print portions of those statutes out in letters, and they sent them to virtually every board of supervisors across the Commonwealth of Virginia in the wake of this Second Amendment sanctuary movement, and basically saying there's no lawful way for citizens to exercise their right to volunteer for service in the unorganized militia, and that's an abject lie. They're wrong.
So our board of supervisors fell for that lie.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I just want that.
Hold on. I'm gonna roll that yep back. I'm gonna
just
take it back. There are supervisors who are very much in support of individual liberties, individual rights, and the full exercise of the Second Amendment, but they were and are still in the minority on that board.
But they were still persuaded by a fictitious document that was libelous.
Well, it's a real document. It's not fictitious.
Well, it's okay by a real document.
Yeah,
that was libelous.
I don't know if it's libelous. Let's say this. It
was disingenuous.
It's disingenuous. It's misleading. It did not state entire truths. And as such, it influenced the opinions of some of the board.
So some of our board of supervisors fell for that line of bullshit.
Yep.
Okay.
I believe
fair
so.
enough.
I believe so.
Good.
But regardless of that, it never was given the opportunity to come to a vote because it was never allowed to be put on the agenda.
Because our board of supervisors attorney decided that it wasn't going to be read.
So there's two reasons. The county attorney gave a negative opinion, so we know for a fact that the county attorney is anti-individual liberties, anti-rights, and anti-Second Amendment. And we also know
who's
that
the county attorney?
And we also know that the person who's responsible for setting the agenda and would not allow the resolution to get to the floor for a vote is responsible. And fortunately, that person is no longer the
chairman.
Chairman, thank you.
Who's the attorney?
I don't recall his name right now.
Okay.
I don't recall.
Because if it's out there, I mean, it's public record.
He's still the county attorney. Nothing's changed.
Okay.
It's the hour's late. I'm getting a little bit.
You're losing your spark.
Well, that's fine. Because we went on a little bit longer than I really anticipated, and at the end of the day,
So I'm sorry. So let me follow up. It really didn't matter that the Board of Supervisors did not pass this resolution in a legal sense because it was a resolution. It was non-binding. It simply expressed the opinion of our elected officials. So the voters of Franklin County should understand that some of the supervisors on that board of supervisors do not support your Second Amendment rights fully. I, in fact, can tell you this. I had one supervisor tell me to my face, if the federal government tells us that semi-automatic firearms are banned, they're banned, and we're not going to do anything about it.
Well, I hate to tell that Board of Supervisors member, but that Board of Supervisors member can kiss my happy ass because
he's no longer with us.
Well, then I'll tell his kids, and I'll go to his grave.
But it's a sentiment that's shared by other members.
I can't fathom that. I can't support
so
that. I can't fathom it. I can't get behind it. I can't even look at you with a straight face without wanting to tell you to suck my white ass for that kind of sentiment, because it's not. What are you going to do when they come marching on my door? Are you going to show up and protect me with your suit? No, you're not. You're going to cower in your frickin' homes, probably cling tight to a weapon that you told us that we're not allowed to have because you want to save your family. That's just it's the mind-boggling nonsense I can't comprehend.
So if they merely stated their support for the full exercise of the Second Amendment by passing that resolution, that would have offered another piece of evidence that the long-lost right of voluntary service in the unorganized militia was no longer lost, that it was current and in practice in this county.
Presentable to the Supreme Court.
It helps the argument for us as individuals to maintain ownership of these certain types of firearms. That's all we were asking them to do, and they were unwilling to do it.
However, those are our Second Amendment rights.
Right. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they're God-given rights that are constitutionally affirmed. It would be nice, though, if our elected officials did their job, their duty, and
their sworn oath,
and defended those rights from infringement. They had the opportunity to merely make the statement, and by doing so, it would have offered evidence that would have led to assisting us defend our rights. But they were unwilling to do it.
Treason. I'll say that word and I don't care. And you know what? I don't care.
A lot of folks in this county think that the supervisors are a mirror reflection of the county.
They're no more a mirror reflection of this county than the town council is a reflection of the
I would agree with that.
Not in the least.
I would agree with that.
Not in the least.
But that being said, there are some who are patriots. There are some on that board who are patriotic, who are willing to stand up for our rights. They're willing to put pen to paper, and they actually did publicly try to get this resolution onto the agenda. So I'm appreciative of their efforts. I'm not painting with a broad brush the entire board, but there are specific members that are definitely not there to defend your rights.
We're talking about an administration level. And therein lies the issue that I have with these people are voted on courtesy of us, we the people, and they are not representing our wishes.
That's correct. Interestingly, when we had this resolution and we unveiled it publicly, the Sheriff Overton, signed our petition to get to have the Board of Supervisors have a vote. That's all we were asking, was for an up or down vote on this resolution. And he signed that petition in support of having the vote. And that should tell you a little bit about where his position on individual rights and individual liberties are. After having had several conversations with him, I believe he is a constitutional sheriff. I do believe he's out to represent the interests of all citizens, and I appreciate his work. I appreciate his service to our community. That being said, our rights stand. They're given to us by the Creator. We don't get them from the sheriff. We don't get them from the Board of Supervisors.
So
we don't
stand
get them
firm.
from the state legislature. That's correct.
Stand firm.
And I guess I do have a question. So if someone is interested in replicating this in their own area or in their own county, how would they go about it?
So we'll be talking a little bit about that at the rally on November 11th. And what our organization is doing is we're creating something. It's a series of documents and papers that would allow you to stand up a constitutional militia, which is really like what I described earlier in the podcast. It is a training organization. It is an advocacy organization. It is a what were the other terms that I used?
You're good.
Okay, you get it. Yeah, the hour's late. And we're not claiming that we're a militia. What we're claiming is we're all members of the militia, and we have a responsibility to be well regulated. So we can help you set up an organization so that you can accept volunteers, so that you can train to be well regulated, so that we offer evidence. And people say, well, is that all you're doing? Well,
Is that all? You've got to be kidding me.
I know, right?
I've seen over 3 years the legalese and study that you have gone through. You, Brian, are a constitutional scholar.
I mean, Brian's put a lot of work in this too, and we have also went from an organization, when I joined.
That was knee-jerk.
Yeah, that was. And we were kind of still figuring out our way, to where we're at today when we're like, hey, here, do you want to replicate this? Here's everything that we've learned the last 3.5 years.
This is how you do it.
Go do it.
We're almost there. I'm almost ready to publicly launch that and assist individuals in other counties across the Commonwealth and say, hey, here's how we did it. Here are the documents, and help you to duplicate what we've done so that you can stand up an independent company of volunteer militia in your county. And in doing so, you're providing evidence that you're well regulated. But there are other benefits to this. Let's say there's a missing person. Suddenly we have a large group of trained volunteers who are familiar with land navigation, first aid. They
NVG, thermal.
Correct. They have the capability of deploying independently and not being a burden. So if they're given search coordinates, hey, can you guys search this area? Okay, we can go do it. Let's say there's a hurricane or a storm or tornadoes and people's homes get destroyed. We can help in the recovery efforts. We can help in the search efforts. Even if the sheriff says, hey, I need you guys to just stand by these orange barrels and make sure people don't come down this road. By us doing something as simple as that, it frees up a deputy, a sworn deputy, to go about and do the duties necessary to the county. So it's a force multiplier for the county. It helps the county to not expend resources it ordinarily would. In addition to that, all of our people, all of the folks who go through this training to become well regulated are no longer a burden if something were to happen. They're capable of supplying power and food and water for their own families. So the county no longer has to be concerned with assisting them, and they can focus their efforts elsewhere. Ultimately, that's what we want to do, is we want to stand up the citizens of every county so that they have more individual responsibility for their own lives, so that they're capable of helping themselves self-rescue in situations like natural disasters, man-made disasters, and catastrophic events. And there was an article in the local newspaper in Roanoke Times back when we were trying to get this resolution passed at the county level. And I don't remember the guy who writes for the Roanoke Times. I don't recall his name, but he's very snarky, and he likes to make snide comments, and so he was making jokes about, well, what do we really need a militia for? The volcanoes in Boone's Mill might erupt, and people would have to come to their rescue, or maybe Henry County would attack Franklin County, and Roanoke County would attack Henry County. Or
Typical progressive agenda.
Right. So just really stupidity.
Typical journalistic integrity from the modern ages.
Right. And, so I didn't respond to it, but it was shortly after the publication of that event that the sheriff of Bedford County asked the militia of Bedford County for assistance to respond to a natural disaster. And Franklin County militia was asked, and Campbell County militia was asked, and we responded with volunteers who gave of their time on Memorial Day weekend with no notice. We have people that gave up their plans with their families to go and help other people. And that's what this is all about. It's independence and self-reliance. It's what the founders gave us. That's their legacy. And if we don't practice these rights, we're abandoning the republic that the founders gave us. When Ben Franklin answered the question, a lady walked up to him and said, "Mr. Franklin, what form of government did you give us? What form of government, has come out of this convention?" And he didn't answer her. He admonished her. He said, "A republic, if you can keep it." He didn't say a democracy. He said a republic, because in a republic, especially a constitutional republic, the absolute truths of the rights granted to us by the Creator are affirmed by that document. And that document is a limiting document. It limits the power of the federal government. And it's the job of our elected representatives to defend those affirmed rights, not to infringe upon them. And when they do, it's our responsibility to rectify that. And if it can't be rectified at the ballot, it needs to be rectified by the revitalization of the militias of the several states.
Brian?
Agreed.
Thank you.
You
Agreed.
are the patriot.
Yeah, that's a good stopping point. And I don't even know. I think there's so many opportunities right here we have with this kind of knowledge right here that we need to extend out to some of our other guests, guys we've had on the show before, with Brandon, with Spike, with a bunch of these characters like that. Like I hate to say you're wasting away here in Franklin County because you're very important, obviously, to what's going on here. But what you're doing here, you never know. You never know how minuscule or how little you think you're creating it. I would guarantee that throughout history, most of the people who we look back on that did something great had no earthly idea they were doing something great at the time. They thought they were just doing what was right. That's it. And then history looks back on them and says, these people in this certain, and I wouldn't be afraid. I hope in 100 years they look back and say, you know what? These guys at the Appalachian Podcast, this redneck hillbilly and this British asshole did something that really sparked, something from you all, from the other guests we've, like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what little can cause a ripple effect that
from
can really,
a small acorn grows a fucking great big oak tree.
There was a man, I've been thinking about this lately. There was a writer that wrote a little pamphlet during the Revolution's darkest hour and moved a nation. And that was, Thomas Paine and Common Sense. And,
we're here right now.
That's a scary thought and also a very hopeful thought.
Yeah. Have hope. Brian, you're a patriot.
I agree.
Gentlemen.
I am honored
I think everybody in this room is a patriot. We just need to.
to call you my friend.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you.
Well, on that note, I just want to thank everybody. For our Patreon subscribers, you got an hour and 18 minutes. It's almost an extra show of content you got here. For our subscribers, I might end up releasing this in a few weeks to the public, maybe in a month or so right there to
Release it.
we'll see in a month or so. But for our subscribers, this is for all y'all. We appreciate everything you do for us, for all the blessings and all the support. And this is what we're doing it here for. And for me, at the end of the day, constitutional militia, I think everything you've presented here today, phenomenal concepts. I really can wrap my head around the idea of setting precedents to be able to fight a legal battle down the road, because exactly what Marxists and communists do. They play the long game. I think it's a breath of fresh air to see people are playing the long game, but I also encourage people, look, I don't really care, me personally, and I'm not speaking for you all, I don't care if you're constitutional militia. I don't care what level you might find yourselves down on. Get with your neighbor, get with your friends on your street, and have your own plan.
That's right.
It doesn't have to be anything massively crazy or conscripted, but say, hey, look, if shit hits the fan, everybody on this street, meet at this house and we'll go on from here. Have a couple people designated, with weapons if you have to, a couple people designated for medical care if you have to, and at least be able to get your community, your neighborhood through the evening, through the night, through the next day. And then from there, be able to speak up after that. So I don't care. I don't care if you and 10 buddies get out there and I'll have weapons and you'll go out once a month and train and say, hey, just in case, this is what we need to train for. I like how you all are doing it by the books. I appreciate that. And I think this is something that needs to be adhered to by most of the public and supported. But if you can't, and you don't have the time and you don't have the ability, get up with your neighbor, get up with your wife, get up with your kids, whoever you got to that's in your neck of the woods, and at least have some type of plan implemented.
Come and listen to the speeches that are going to be made
November 11th.
On November 11th.
At the park.
5 to 1, turn up there.
We're going to have a good time with that. That's going to be, once again, November 11th at the Summit View Park Pavilion on 92 Pleasant Breeze Road, Rocky Mountain. It's right off Virgil Highway, if I ain't mistaken. So It's really close to get to. You're not far from the Bojangles and Dairy Queen on 220 to get there. Come out and hang out. We're going to be there. Hopefully we'll set up a tent. We'll have the equipment set up. Maybe we'll talk to a few veterans. I know a couple. Maybe we'll have some more stories or whatnot and figure out
let's rock up.
What the deal is.
Let's rock up and support community.
Absolutely.
Because that's what this is about.
That's what this is all about. Yeah. That's right.
That's it. Simple and clear. Community.
So, Brian, Jeremiah, Simon, thank y'all so very much. And,
thank you, sir.
We'll do it again the next time. I promise y'all.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Take it easy.